They say betrayal doesn't happen all at once. It's a slow unraveling, a whisper before the storm. At first, it was just a feeling. A shift in her touch. A hesitation in her voice. A glance that lingered too long where it shouldn't have. But the truth isn't something you stumble upon. The truth is something you dig for. And when you dig deep enough, you find things you wish you hadn't. She swore she loved me. That she would never betray me. And for a while, I let myself believe her. But belief is dangerous. It makes you blind. And I don't like being blind. So I did what I do best. I watched. I waited. And I let her show me exactly who she was. And just like that, she proved me right. The woman I married was never who she pretended to be. Chapter 1. Divorce is supposed to be painful. It's supposed to be filled with regret, second-guessing, maybe even a last-minute change of heart. But for me, it was relief. I sat there, pen in hand, feeling nothing. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a quiet satisfaction that settled deep in my chest. Across from me, Olivia looked like a woman standing at the edge of a cliff, staring down at the life she thought was hers, realizing too late that the ground had already crumbled beneath her feet. Her hands were shaking, her lips pressed together so tightly they were turning white. She kept darting her eyes between me and the papers in front of us, like if she stared long enough, she could will them into disappearing. Her voice was small when she finally spoke. Please don't do this. I didn't respond right away. I let the silence stretch between us, let her sit in the weight of what she had done. She thought she still had control. She thought this was a mistake, a misunderstanding, something that could be undone with the right words. She had no idea. Her mother, always the loudest voice in the room, scoffed from behind her. You're a fool, Ryan. My daughter has been loyal to you. A cop's life is hard. You're throwing away a strong, dedicated woman. Loyal? That word alone nearly made me laugh. I didn't even look at her. I kept my eyes on Olivia. They thought I was the fool. The weak, lovesick husband walking away from a woman who gave her all. But in reality, Olivia had been playing a game she never realized I had already won. She reached for me, desperation breaking through in the way her fingers trembled. Just talk to me. We can fix this. We always fix things. I let out a slow breath. You did this, Olivia. Not me. I watched the words sink in. Watched as realization finally hit her like a freight train. The tears started then, the quiet kind at first, the ones she tried to fight back. I used to think those tears meant something. That they carried guilt, sorrow, love. I know better now. I set the pen down, smoothed out the wrinkles in my shirt, and stood. And just like that, it was over. Or at least, that's where it ended. But where did it begin? Because this wasn't sudden. It wasn't some impulsive decision, fueled by a single mistake. No, this moment was a long time coming. It was built piece by piece, over months, over years, until there was nothing left but this. To understand how we got here, you need to go back. Back to the moment Olivia thought she had won. Back to when she thought I would never leave. Back to when she thought she could lie to my face, and I would still love her. Chapter 2. 1 week before the divorce, I found the final nail in the coffin. Messages. Photos. A familiar name. Officer Adam Clark. That name wasn't new to me. I had heard it before, more times than I cared to count. Olivia used to mention him in passing. Just a coworker. Just a friend. Just someone she worked with. But late at night, when the house was quiet and the only sound was the slow, steady rhythm of her breathing beside me, I unlocked her phone and saw the truth. She thought she was being careful. She thought she was smart. She deleted everything. Wiped conversations clean. Kept her tracks covered just enough to give herself an illusion of innocence. But what Olivia never realized was that I had stopped trusting her long before she started hiding things. People who have nothing to hide don't spend their nights erasing evidence. I scrolled through the recovered messages, reading words she probably never thought I'd see. Words she never hesitated to type, never hesitated to send. Words that made it painfully clear that my wife was never mine. I miss you. I wish we could meet up like we used to. I kept reading. Just say when and where, baby. Baby. That was the word she used for me. The same word she whispered in my ear when she wanted something. The same word she moaned when she pulled me close at night. The same word she sent to him without hesitation, like it meant nothing. Because to her, it didn't. I should have felt something then. Rage. Heartbreak. Maybe even the sting of betrayal. But all I felt was confirmation. I had known. Maybe not in the beginning. Maybe not when I stood at the altar and promised her forever. Maybe not when I spent years trying to be the man she claimed she wanted. But at some point I knew. I knew when she started coming home late, always with a reason that sounded more rehearsed than real. I knew when she suddenly cared more about locking her phone than looking me in the eyes. I knew when I watched her pick up her phone, smile at a name that wasn't mine, and then quickly tuck it away as if I wouldn't notice. She thought I wouldn't notice. That was the most insulting part. It wasn't the cheating. It wasn't the lying. It was the arrogance. The way she carried on as if I were too blind, too naive, too stupid to see the way she was slipping away. She thought she was always one step ahead. She thought she had mastered the game. She thought she could have everything, her double life, her secrets, her stolen moments with men who were never supposed to matter. She had no idea I had stopped playing a long time ago. I put the phone down. My hands were steady. My pulse, slow. I turned my head to look at her, lying there beside me. Peaceful. Untouched by guilt. She would never confess. She would never sit me down and tell me the truth. She would never wake up in the middle of the night, gasping for air because the weight of what she had done was too much to carry. Because women like Olivia don't feel guilt. They don't suffer under the burden of their own deception. They just keep going, keep taking, keep living under the illusion that the lies they tell will never be uncovered. And the worst part? They don't even consider the possibility that the man lying beside them, the man they've deceived, the man they believe is helpless, might already know. I didn't wake her up. I didn't confront her. That would have been too easy. I wanted her to keep digging her own grave. I wanted her to wake up the next morning and think nothing had changed. I wanted her to look at me and believe that I was still the fool she had been manipulating for years. Because the deeper she went, the worse it would be when she realized I had been watching the whole time. Chapter 3. From that moment, I let her believe she had won. I woke up the next morning like nothing had happened. Kissed her on the cheek as she made coffee, let her ramble on about some case at work while I nodded along. I played my part. The devoted husband. The man who was still under her spell. She smiled at me like she always did, completely unaware that everything had shifted. She was free. Free to do whatever she wanted. Free to keep lying. Free to keep sneaking around. Because now, I wanted her to. That evening, when she walked into the living room, fixing her hair, adjusting her uniform, I asked, "Going out tonight?" She blinked, hesitated for a second, then smiled. "Yeah. Girls' night. You know how it is. Girls' night." The same excuse she had used before. The same excuse she had used the night she went home with another man. I nodded, acting as if I didn't already know the truth. "Have fun." She seemed surprised by how easily I let it go. But she didn't question it. She just grabbed her purse and left. The second she walked out the door, I got to work. She had no idea I was quietly moving our money. One transaction at a time. Just small enough that she wouldn't notice. I pulled my name from the credit cards, transferred my investments, rerouted my direct deposits. She had no idea I had started tracking her. I installed the app while she was in the shower. She had been careless, leaving her phone on the nightstand. A few taps, a quick download, and suddenly, I had access to everything. Messages. Calls. Location. She had no idea. And that was the best part. A few nights later, she came home late. Too late. The kind of late that made it obvious she wasn't just out with friends. She stepped through the door, her makeup slightly smudged, her perfume stronger than usual, like she had reapplied it before coming inside. I was on the couch, pretending to be half asleep, remote in hand, TV still on. She hesitated when she saw me. "Hey, you're still up?" I rubbed my eyes like I had just woken up. "Yeah. Couldn't sleep." She walked over, dropping her bag onto the table. "Long night." I stretched. Fun. She smiled. Yeah. Just drinks and talking. You know how it is. I knew exactly how it was. She bent down, kissed my forehead. A distraction. A way to avoid looking me in the eyes for too long. I played along. I let her kiss me. I let her believe I was still that man. The one who trusted her. The one who wouldn't question her. She went to bed first. I waited until she was asleep before I opened the app. Her location history. Her calls. Her texts. There was no girls' night. Just him. And still I said nothing. Because I wasn't done letting her ruin herself. Chapter 4. The things I found made my blood boil. Not in the way you'd expect. Not in some wild, explosive way where I threw the phone against the wall, demanding answers, screaming her name. No, the anger I felt was something else. Something colder. It sat deep in my stomach, settled in my chest like a heavy weight pressing down. I had seen the signs. I had felt the lies. But there's something different about knowing and seeing. And that night I saw everything. It started with the messages. I had already recovered the recent ones, the ones with Officer Adam Clark, the ones that painted a picture of a woman who had no problem lying to her husband while texting another man in the same bed they shared. But that was just scratching the surface. I dug deeper. And that's when I saw it. Messages from years ago. Before the late nights became routine. Before the fake excuses became second nature. Before I even had a reason to question her. They had always been there, buried beneath the surface. Forgotten by her, but never erased. That night in your patrol car was insane. I read it once. Then again. And again. The words sat there on the screen, taunting me. She had told me she was working overtime that night. That she had been stuck at the station, drowning in paperwork. I had believed her. I had kissed her when she came home, let her crawl into bed beside me, held her as she fell asleep. Meanwhile, she had been with him. I kept reading. I still think about you in uniform. I had always noticed how much pride she took in her job. The way she carried herself in that crisp blue uniform, the way she stood a little taller when she talked about her work. I used to admire it. Now, I wondered how many men had seen her the same way I had. I scrolled further. Let's meet at the precinct garage. No one will know. I stared at those words for a long time. Let them sink in. No one will know. That was the game she played. The secret life she had built while I was too busy trusting her. I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Just sat there, phone in hand, reading every word she had ever sent to a man that wasn't me. And there were a lot of them. Different names. Different dates. Different places. The pattern was the same. The lies were identical. It wasn't just Adam Clark. It wasn't just one mistake. It wasn't just a moment of weakness. She had been doing this for years. From the very beginning, from the vows she had spoken with tears in her eyes, from the nights she came home late with stories about long shifts and exhausted coworkers, from the mornings she kissed me goodbye, looking me straight in the eye, telling me she loved me. She had never stopped lying. And I had never stopped believing her. I heard movement from the bedroom. The sound of blankets shifting, the quiet sigh she always made when she stretched in her sleep. Then, the soft footsteps padding down the hall. A moment later, she was in front of me. Hair tousled, eyes still heavy with sleep, wearing the oversized t-shirt of mine she had stolen years ago. She smiled. "What are you doing up?" I looked at her. Really looked at her. Chapter 5. My mother gave me the only thing I had left of her. A framed picture. A reminder. It wasn't anything expensive. Nothing flashy. Just a simple wooden frame, the kind you'd find in any home, holding a black and white photograph of the woman who raised me. The woman who taught me strength. The woman who never let the world break her, no matter how hard it tried. She had given it to me when I was younger, before she got sick, before the hospital visits, before I had to watch the light in her eyes fade. "Keep this with you," she had said, pressing it into my hands. "No matter where life takes you, no matter what happens, this will always remind you who you are." And I had. Through every stage of my life, every change, every heartbreak, that picture stayed with me. It was there when I graduated, when I moved into my first apartment, when I got married. I kept it close, like she was still watching over me. It sat on my desk, always within reach, always where I could see it. A reminder of where I came from. A reminder of the only person who had ever truly loved me without conditions, without expectations, without lies. Until the day Olivia's dog knocked it over. It happened in an instant. A blur of fur, an excited tail wag, a careless stumble. The sound of glass shattering hit my ears before I even realized what had happened. I looked down. The frame lay on the floor in pieces. Shards of glass scattered across the hardwood. The photograph, bent at the edges, no longer protected. I didn't move. Didn't say a word. Olivia walked in, glanced at the mess, and then, she laughed. "Relax, babe. It's just a picture. Just a picture." Something inside me went silent. I bent down, picking up the broken frame piece by piece. My hands moved slowly, deliberately. There was no rush. No reaction. Just the sound of glass shifting under my fingers. I could feel her watching me, still amused, still smiling like it was nothing. "I'll get you a new frame," she said casually. "Or we can just put it in an album or something. It's not a big deal." Not a big deal. I held the photograph carefully, brushing away the shattered remains of what had once protected it. "It was my mother's," I said, my voice even, steady. "I know, babe, but come on. It's not like it's ruined." She was already turning away, dismissing it, moving on like she always did. Like nothing ever mattered unless it was about her. That was the moment I felt it. The last bit of love I had for her was gone. I looked at her, then really looked at her. At the woman I had once believed in. The woman I had given my name, my loyalty, my time. The woman who had lied to my face more times than I could count. And all I saw was a stranger. I had spent years making excuses. Years convincing myself that love meant patience, that love meant forgiveness, that love meant seeing the best in someone even when they gave you every reason not to. But love had nothing to do with this. Because love doesn't disappear in a single moment. It doesn't vanish in the span of a heartbeat. Love dies slowly. It dies with every lie. Every betrayal. Every time you look at the person beside you and realize they are nothing like who they pretended to be. It dies when the person you vowed to stand beside doesn't even blink at something that meant the world to you. And once it's gone, once that last thread of love snaps, there's no bringing it back. I stood up, placing the photograph on the desk with careful hands. I didn't look at Olivia. Didn't say another word. Because she didn't deserve one. She would never know what had just happened. She would never know that this was the moment I stopped seeing her as my wife. That I had already let go. She would never know. Until it was too late. Chapter 6. Then came her final mistake. By that point, I had given Olivia enough rope to hang herself 100 times over. I had watched her lie to my face, watched her walk out the door at night with rehearsed excuses, watched her come home wearing the same fake smile, acting as if I were the same blind fool she had always taken me for. But this time was different. This time, she didn't just make a mistake. She gave me exactly what I needed to destroy her. It was casual when she brought it up. Too casual. The kind of forced ease that only comes when someone has practiced the words before saying them out loud. "Oh, by the way, I'm meeting up with an old friend tomorrow. Someone from work. You don't mind, right?" She looked at me when she said it, watching my reaction carefully, searching for any sign that I might question her. I gave her none. "Who is it?" I asked, keeping my voice level, uninterested. She hesitated. A fraction of a second. But I caught it. "Just an old coworker. Someone who left the force a while ago." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. A nervous habit. I had seen it before. "That's so?" I asked. She nodded, her fingers still fidgeting. "Yeah. We were close back in the day. He's going through a rough time, so I figured I'd catch up with him. Just to see how he's doing." She was lying. She thought I didn't know. She thought I had no idea who she was talking about. Officer Adam Clark. She had spent years playing this game. Years thinking she was in control. But the thing about people like Olivia? They always slip up. They always get greedy. They always go too far. And that night she did exactly that. I waited until she left. Waited until she thought she was safe. Waited until she believed she had fooled me once again. Then I pulled out my phone. The tracking app was already open. The location was already pinned. And there it was. A bar, downtown. A place she had never mentioned before. A place I had never heard her talk about. A place she had gone straight to, without hesitation. I pulled up the surveillance footage. There they were. Sitting too close. Laughing too much. The way her body leaned into his. The way his hand rested on her thigh. The way they looked at each other. Like I never existed. Like I had never mattered. I stared at the screen watching them. Watching her. She had no idea. No idea that while she sat there, sipping her drink, playing her little game, I was about to ruin her entire life. She had no idea that while she whispered into his ear, laughing at whatever lie she was telling, I was collecting everything. Every second. Every frame. She had no idea that the moment she walked out of that bar, she would no longer be the woman she thought she was. Because I was done waiting. I was done letting her pretend. I was done letting her think she had won. I forwarded the footage. To Adam Clark's wife. To Olivia's bosses. To everyone who needed to see exactly who she was. And then, I sat back. And I watched her world come crashing down. Chapter 7. I knew who she was before she ever said I do. I married her anyway, just to watch her destroy herself. People like Olivia think they're untouchable. They think they can weave a web of lies so intricate, so carefully crafted, that no one will ever see the truth beneath it. They get comfortable. They get sloppy. And when they finally fall, they never see it coming. She thought I had fallen for her. That I was another name on her list, another man she could manipulate, another fool who would chase her even when she tripped over her own deceit. She thought she was playing the game. She never realized she was the game. The truth is, Olivia was never special. Women like her never are. They're just good at illusions. Good at playing the role they know will get them exactly what they want. For her, it was the devoted girlfriend. The perfect wife. The dedicated cop with the long hours and the innocent smiles. The one who could lie straight to my face, kiss me goodnight, and still have room in her schedule to entertain another man. But before I was her husband, I was something else. A private investigator. I had spent years uncovering the secrets people thought they could bury. I had watched men and women alike whisper their confessions into someone else's ear while their spouse sat at home, unaware. I had seen the same patterns over and over again. The fake excuses. The late nights. The deleted messages. The gaslighting. The rehearsed apologies when they got caught. And Olivia? She was no different. I knew her past before she ever met me. I knew the way she operated. I knew about the men before me. The ones she strung along, the ones she got bored of, the ones she discarded like old habits when something more exciting came along. I knew she had never been faithful to a single man in her life. And so, I married her. Not because I loved her. Not because I believed she would change. But because I wanted to see how long it would take before she ruined herself. It was a test. A slow, careful game of patience. And she had failed spectacularly. I watched her lie to me. Watched her make excuses. Watched her slip into the same habits that had defined her entire life. And the best part? She had no idea she was being watched the whole time. She never realized that every step she took, every lie she told, every secret she thought she was keeping, was something I had already anticipated. By the time we sat in that divorce office, her world crumbling, her voice shaking, her hands desperate as they reached for me, I had already moved on. Her tears didn't matter. Her apologies meant nothing. She had been exposed, unraveled, stripped of every illusion she had ever created. And now, she was just another woman who thought she could outplay me. I leaned in close, let my voice drop just enough so she'd have to listen carefully. I never loved you. She froze. I just wanted to see if you'd prove me right. She did. And now? I was free. I stood, buttoned my jacket, and walked out of that office without looking back. Because Olivia was finally where she had always been destined to be. Alone. And I had won.